The void was a patient predator, silent, endless, and always watching. My ship drifted in lazy arcs around the station's perimeter, sensors humming in the background. It was a routine sweep, the kind you could almost sleep through if you weren't careful. That's when I saw it. A glint, impossibly warm against the cold backdrop of stars. At first, I thought it was debris, maybe a scrap of hull plating catching stray light. But as I adjusted the viewport magnification, the truth emerged. A compass, not a sleek digital tool or a sensor array, but a centuries-old brass compass. Its casing tarnished yet whole, its glass unscratched, floating in a perfect stillness that the vacuum should have long ago devoured. I blinked, leaned closer. My mind tried to file it somewhere it could make sense. Shipwreck salvage, an experiment lost in the station, maybe even a trick of the light. But no, it was solid, it was real, and it was wrong. I keyed the comms. Station, this is Patrol 27. I've got something unusual. Describe. The voice on the other end was clipped mechanical. The tone of someone halfway through a checklist, not expecting anything worth writing down. A compass. Brass. Looks antique. Conditions pristine. A beat of static followed. I expected the obvious questions. How far out? Is it moving? Could it be from a known vessel? But instead, there was no curiosity, no hesitation. Retrieve it. Bring it in for diagnosis. No context. No speculation. Just an order. I sat there for a moment, staring at the thing drifting against the infinite. The station's response wasn't just strange. It was unnerving. They hadn't even asked for telemetry or visuals. It was as if they already knew what it was. Still, orders were orders. Copy that, I said, though my voice felt thin in my throat. I powered down the sweep pattern, aligning my ship to close the distance. The autopilot could have done it, but I took manual control. It kept my hands busy, kept my thoughts from circling too hard around the impossibility of what I was seeing. As the compass grew in the viewport, the rest of space seemed to retreat from it. Not literally. Stars still burned on every side, but there was something about its presence that drew the eye and refused to let go. Like a single drop of ink spreading through water, my attention narrowed until all I saw was brass and glass. I sealed my helmet, the hiss of oxygen filling my ears. The airlock cycle began, the outer hatch yawning open to spill me into blackness. Space greeted me, not as cold I could feel, but as a deep, marrow-frozen absence. It wasn't wind. It wasn't touch. It was the weight of nothing. The kind of nothing that made you aware of every beat of your heart. Thruster bursts carried me forward in short, careful intervals. The compass hovered, perfectly motionless. No tether, no spin, no drift. It was as if the laws of inertia had politely stepped aside to make way for it. When I reached it, I noticed something I couldn't have seen from the ship. North was gone. Not faded, not scratched off, just gone. As though the word had never existed in the first place. Like a missing tooth in a smile. The other markings were there, east, west, south. But the space where north should have been was simply blank brass. And the needle, it spun. Not smoothly, not predictably, but in little stuttering circles. Twitching, jerking, never slowing. It wasn't finding magnetic north. It wasn't even searching in a way that made sense. It reminded me of the way an insect might scuttle when trapped in a jar, darting toward invisible points, panicking. A ripple of unease climbed my spine. My visor fogged for a second before the suit's ventilation cleared it. I'd retrieved my share of oddities. Frozen rations that somehow drifted 2 sectors from their launch point, fragments of meteorite streaked with alien minerals, even an entire chair once from some long-forgotten passenger ship, but never something that felt alive in its wrongness. I hesitated. My training told me this was just an object, a lump of brass and glass. But something deeper, older in me, the part of the mind that remembers shadows moving where they shouldn't, told me to leave it. I should have listened. Instead, I reached out. My glove closed around the compass. The instant I touched it, I swore I felt heat, not the filtered warmth of my own suit systems, but a pulse. A momentary throb of something that didn't belong in empty space. I flinched, almost letting it drift away again. But the order replayed in my head. Retrieve it. And so I did. Clipping it to my belt, I fired the thrusters for the short return. The ship's hatch sealed behind me. And only then did I realize my breathing had quickened. My suit telemetry scrolled across the HUD in sharp red warnings about oxygen consumption. I forced it back under control. By the time I removed my helmet, I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing. Just a weird old compass with a missing mark. The warmth was probably residual from the suit's heating coils. Probably. That's when the static started. It wasn't loud, more a thin, insectal hiss curling at the edges of the comms feed. The kind of sound you get when a transmitter is catching signals it shouldn't. I frowned, leaning toward the console, and adjusted the frequency dials. The hiss rose, fell. Then, through the noise, a voice. Compass, no, never retrieve, void, listen. I froze. Identify yourself, I said, my voice lower than I intended. The reply came in fragments, shredded by static. Mine belonged to me. It leads to it will find you, no matter where. The timbre of the voice was strange, neither young nor old, but worn thin, like paper handled too many times. There was an edge of panic under the words, something desperate. I leaned closer, pressing my palm to the console. Repeat your last. Too late, it's already. The transmission cut, not faded, not clicked off. One moment there was sound, and the next there was nothing. The kind of nothing that feels wrong in your ears, as though they've stopped working entirely. I sat there, staring at the comms display. My hands moved automatically, running sweeps for the origin. What I found made no sense. The signal had come from the coordinates of a derelict station I knew by name, a graveyard in orbit around a broken moon. One survivor had been reported when it went dark years ago. That survivor was never recovered. I looked down. The compass sat in my lap, still twitching its needle in erratic arcs. I watched it for a long moment before realizing that the twitch was slowing, gradually, deliberately, until at last the needle stopped. It pointed toward the viewport. I followed its direction with my eyes. At first, I thought it was just a patch of darker space, a void between star clusters. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it became. It wasn't empty space I was seeing. It was the absence of space. An orb, a sphere of absolute blackness, blacker than the gulf around it, blacker than shadow, blacker than thought. And it was moving. No light reflected from it. No distortion halo marked its edges. It simply erased whatever was behind it, stars, dust, planets, replacing them with nothing at all. And it was growing. I couldn't tell if it was expanding in size or drawing nearer. Both possibilities were equally bad. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to burn the engines, to turn for the station and never look back. But I didn't. My gaze stayed locked on that impossible sphere and on the compass in my hand that had, moments ago, been spinning without purpose. Now it had found its bearing, and whatever it pointed to was coming. The sphere didn't belong. That was my first coherent thought after the shock passed. Everything in space moves according to rules. Gravity, momentum, the push and pull of forces we can measure, chart, predict. But this thing, it just was... Its size didn't register on my instruments in any way that made sense. My scanners couldn't give me distance or mass. Even the LiDAR sweeps came back blank, as though the pulses passed straight through and never returned. Yet there it was, growing. I forced my gaze down to the compass in my lap, hoping it would spin again, point anywhere else to anything else. But the needle stayed fixed, sharp as a blade in its stillness, aimed straight at the blackness ahead. I swallowed. Station, this is Patrol 27. I said into the comms, my voice more strained than I wanted. I've got visual on an unknown anomaly. Possible spatial distortion, bearing 028. Recommend you pull all. Static, the same thin hiss as before, curling like smoke in my ears. I tried again, cycling through emergency bands. Nothing but static. And then, layered inside it, the voice. You brought it, you brought it. The words were clearer this time, though still ragged, like someone speaking through a throat that hadn't seen water in years. This is Patrol 27. Identify yourself. You didn't listen. It was mine, and now it's yours. I gripped the edge of the console hard enough for my gloves to creak. The compass. A wet, broken laugh spilled through the static, the kind that makes your teeth ache just hearing it. They gave it to me, too. The voice said, the words hitching like something was pulling them away mid-breath. Not the station. Not them. It. I thought I could follow it. Thought I was clever. Thought I'd find what it wanted me to find before it found me. The transmission faltered into hissing silence. Where are you transmitting from? I asked, more to keep him talking than out of any hope of finding him. No place left, not space, not anywhere. And then, faintly, so faintly I almost convinced myself I imagined, it knows your shape now. I sat back, pulse hammering in my throat. My mind kept snagging on those last words. Knows your shape. I didn't want to think about what that meant. Whether he was talking about my ship, my face, or something deeper. The sphere outside the viewport seemed closer now. I knew that wasn't possible in the few minutes since I'd first seen it. But when I checked the compass again, the needle's unwavering precision told me otherwise. Whatever this thing was, it was moving toward me, or I was moving toward it. I killed the ship's drift entirely, engaging full station-keeping thrusters. The stars should have shifted subtly against the frame of the viewport. They didn't. The only thing that moved was the sphere. The mind has a way of measuring distance, even when the instruments fail. A star field is a fixed backdrop. You learn to read the way objects cross it. I didn't need telemetry to see that the sphere was devouring more of the view every minute. It wasn't like a shadow creeping forward. There was no gradation, no edge blur, no shift in light. It was an instant subtraction. A star burned bright 1 second, gone the next. Entire clusters vanished as if erased from the universe. It wasn't consuming them in the way a black hole would. They weren't being dragged inward. They were simply ceasing. I ran a full spectrum sweep in every band we had. Infrared, nothing. Ultraviolet, nothing. Neutrino sensors, nothing. My instruments weren't just failing to read it. They were returning impossible negatives, as though the absence itself was an active property. The voice crackled back into the comms, startling me enough that I flinched. Don't look at it too long. I snapped my gaze away from the viewport. Why? What happens? It's there when you see it. And when it's there, it sees you. Doesn't need eyes. Doesn't need anything. The looking is enough. I found my breath coming shallow. My hand hovered over the control to kill external feeds entirely, but my other hand tightened around the compass. The needle didn't twitch, didn't so much as tremble. It wanted me to keep looking. I didn't know if that one was the compasses or the spheres. I thought about the survivor, about his broken, disjointed sentences. There was a weight in his voice, the hollowed-out sound of someone who hadn't spoken to another living thing in a very long time. If he was the same man from the derelict station report, he'd been alone in the dark for years, maybe decades. And if he was telling the truth, whatever had been chasing him had done so without needing to close the gap in any way we understood. I almost asked him how he'd managed to stay alive this long. But before I could, his voice dropped to a whisper, almost a breath against my ear. It'll start with the quiet. The quiet? I asked. You'll know it when it happens. The channel went dead. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the ship's systems, trying to convince myself that hum was a comfort. Then I realized it was dimmer than before. Not softer, dimmer, like a light being turned down. The fan still spun. The air recycler still whispered to the vents, but all of it sounded muted. I flicked to the environmental readouts. No drop in pressure. No loss of oxygen. Temperature nominal. And yet, the ship felt muffled around me, as though the sound itself was being thinned out. I turned to the viewport. The sphere was bigger now. Fear is a strange thing in space. Out here, you're always surrounded by the knowledge that one wrong move could kill you. You live with that fear the way you live with your own shadow. But this was different. This wasn't fear of dying. This was fear of being unmade. I stared at the compass again. For the first time since I had picked it up, I noticed the glass wasn't perfectly smooth. From a distance, it had looked unblemished, but up close, there were faint lines etched into the surface. Not scratches. Symbols. Tiny, looping shapes, so fine I couldn't tell if they'd been carved by hand or grown there somehow. They were hard to look at, like my eyes kept wanting to slide off them. I tried running a scan, but the reader returned nothing. Literally nothing. No record that I'd even placed it in the cradle. It was as though the compass didn't exist as a physical object my ship could measure. The sphere's edge swallowed a star directly ahead of me. The star was just gone. No flare, no collapse. The blackness spread outward from that point like ink soaking into paper. I swore I felt something tug at the back of my mind as it happened. A faint, dizzy pull. My hands went cold. That's when the survivor spoke again. "Don't follow it." "I'm not," I said through clenched teeth. "You will." The way he said it, not as a warning but as a certainty, made the cabin feel smaller. Why would I follow it? Because it's closer than you think. Because you'll hear it. The silence deepened, not just in volume, in presence. I could hear my heartbeat now and the soft pop of my joints as I shifted in my seat. The normal background chorus of a working ship, the creak of the hull, the tick of thermal expansion, was gone. Outside, the sphere kept growing. And for the first time, I thought I saw movement inside it. Not shapes exactly, but currents, like something beneath black water. The darkness wasn't solid, it had depth, and in that depth, something vast was shifting. The compass twitched in my hand. Only once, but it was enough to make me grip it tighter. I don't know how long I stared before I realized I was leaning forward in my chair, my nose almost touching the glass of the viewport. I made myself look away, but in the reflection of the console screen, I swore I saw the blackness ripple. It was closer. There was no logic to it. I hadn't engaged repulsion, hadn't drifted forward, yet the sphere now filled almost a third of the forward viewport. My eyes kept telling me it was near, even though the readouts insisted they were still tracking nothing at all. No mass, no motion, no heat signature. My ship's systems behaved as though there was simply empty space ahead. But it wasn't empty. The blackness had depth now, a layered texture, as if I were looking into folds of something impossibly vast. At first, I thought it was just my eyes trying to make sense of the absence. But then it shifted, like something beneath an ocean moving slowly. Patiently, the compass in my lap shivered, a tiny vibration I could feel through the gloves. The needle quivered once, then stilled again, perfectly aligned toward the sphere. The voice came without warning, breaking the near silence. "You still have time to turn away." I swallowed. "You said it would find me no matter where I go." A pause. Then, "Yes." "Then what difference does it make if I turn away now?" "You don't want to see it up close," the survivor said. His words were slower this time, less frantic, but heavier, as if weighed down by memories he didn't want to carry. "It's not the same from far away. Out here, you can pretend it's just a hole. When you're near enough, there's no pretending." My gaze flicked back to the viewport. The sphere's edge was unervingly sharp, a perfect curve against the star field, as if drawn with infinite precision. "What is it?" I asked. A ragged breath crackled through the comms. "It's where the map ends. The place the compass points when there's nothing left to find." "That's not an answer." "You think it's a thing," he said. "Something you can touch, measure, name." "It isn't. It's after. After light. After matter. After you. You don't come back from there, because there's no there to come back to." My hands were tight on the armrests. I should have been turning the ship, burning for the station, calling for help on every frequency. Instead, I found myself glancing down at the navigation panel. Without thinking, I ran a course projection, not away but toward the sphere. The autopilot refused to calculate, returning the same error, an no fixed destination. And yet my thumb hovered over the manual, "Override." The survivor must have sensed it. "It's already in your head, isn't it?" The thought that maybe you could be the one to reach it, to understand it. I didn't answer. "That's how it works," he went on. "Not with force. Not at first. Just a pull. And once you follow it far enough, the only thing left to wonder is how much of you is still making the choice." The quiet was deeper now. My breathing was too loud in my own ears. Every sound in the cabin seemed isolated, as if the space around them had been hollowed out. I tapped the hull microphone feed, a subconscious check I'd done countless times before. Normally, there's always something out there, the faint hiss of solar wind, the whisper of micrometeorites pinging off the plating, the low drone of cosmic background radiation converted into sound. Now there was nothing, not even static. It was as if the universe had turned its face away. I made the mistake of looking into the sphere again. This time, the depths were clearer. Not clear like transparency. Clear like staring down a deep well and realizing the darkness is not uniform. I could sense movement in there, but the scale was impossible. One moment it seemed vast enough to hold galaxies. The next it felt inches away, brushing the edge of my mind. I felt a faint pressure against my temples. Not pain, exactly, but a gentle insistence. Like the first hint of a headache you know will come later. I blinked, and for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw lines in the darkness. Not shapes, not creatures. Lines impossibly straight, arranged in angles that my brain refused to map. They weren't in the sphere so much as they were part of its structure, like bones in the body of a god. The compass needle trembled once more. "Tell me," I said quietly, "what happened to your station?" There was a long silence before the survivor answered. We were a listening post. Nothing special. Out past the mining lanes. Too far for regular traffic. One day, a ship drifted past. No registry. No distress call. Just drifting. His voice lowered. It was a cargo hauler. From the outside, it looked fine. Inside, he trailed off, and when he spoke again, his voice was thinner. Inside, there was nothing. No crew. No cargo. Not even walls in some places. Just open, like something had hollowed it out in patches. And floating in the middle of the bridge was the compass. I gripped the armrest tighter. "We brought it aboard," he said. It didn't take long before we realized the needle wasn't pointing to magnetic north. It was pointing somewhere else. We argued about what to do. Half the crew wanted to throw it back into space. The other half wanted to see what it was pointing to. "And you?" I asked. A bitter sound escaped him. I wanted to know. So we followed it. He told me about the journey, about days passing without sleep, without real conversation, as the compass drew them onward. Instruments stopped working. Star maps failed to match reality. Distances became unreliable. Then one day, they saw the sphere. By then, he said, it was already too close. We thought we could stop, turn around. But he exhaled hard, the calms distorting. It's not a location. It's a state. Once you're in its reach, you're already falling toward it. Doesn't matter which way you point your ship. What happened to the others? His voice cracked on the answer. They went outside. I frowned. Outside the ship? Why? They said they heard something. Not through the comms. In their heads. Whispering. Calling. They opened the airlock, and they didn't come back. And you? I stopped listening, he said. Blocked my ears. Taped my visor over the viewport. Floated in the dark for I don't know how long. Eventually the sphere moved on, or I drifted out of its path. Doesn't matter. I thought I was free. But the compass. I realized I was leaning forward again, my hands curled tight around the very object he was talking about. It always comes back, he finished. I should have turned away then. Should have dumped the compass into the black and burned for the station. Instead, I released the ship from station keeping and felt a gentle push of the thrusters orient me toward the sphere. The survivor's voice rose sharply. Don't. You can't come back from it. Then maybe it's better no, I said before I could stop myself. You think knowledge is a prize, he said. It's the bait. But his voice was distant now, smothered by the deepening quiet. And beneath that quiet, I thought I heard something else. Not sound exactly, more like the memory of sound. A faint vibration at the base of my skull, rhythmic and patient, like breathing, from the direction of the sphere. The compass needle twitched again, and this time, I didn't fight the urge to follow it. The thrusters whispered, and the ship obeyed. The sphere loomed large in the viewport, so vast now that I could no longer see its curve. Only a flat, infinite blackness swallowing everything ahead. It was like approaching the edge of the known universe and finding that it ended in a wall. No instruments acknowledged our movement, according to the NAV computer. I was still holding position, drifting lazily in open space. But outside, the stars vanished one by one. The blackness didn't come closer. It simply erased more reality. The compass lay in my lap, the needle trembling with a subtle, almost eager vibration. I realized I could feel it through the hull now, not the compass itself, but the pull it represented. The survivor's voice came back in a burst of ragged static. "You've crossed it." "Crossed what?" "Event horizon," he said. "Not in the way you think. Not gravity. Not light bending. You've stepped into its thought." The word sent a ripple down my spine. "What does that mean?" "It's building you," he said, his voice breaking into wet, glitching fragments. "Making a place for you. Doesn't need to take you. It just replaces you." My knuckles whitened against the armrests. "I'm still me. Are you?" Something shimmered in the black ahead. For a fraction of a second, the darkness thinned, and I saw structure. It wasn't solid. It was made of angles, sharp, clean lines that stretched on without intersecting in any way that should have been possible. Geometries that shifted when I tried to focus, rearranging themselves as though they were aware of my attention. The shimmer vanished, leaving only the black. But the afterimage burned in my vision. Vast corridors with no walls. Shapes that seemed to both expand outward and fold inward at the same time. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. When my vision cleared, the blackness wasn't empty anymore. There were lights. They weren't stars. Stars are fixed points, steady in their distance. These lights moved. They pulsed faintly, like distant lanterns swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. Sometimes they drifted apart. Sometimes they clustered together in tight constellations. And they were getting closer. My skin prickled. The lights had no defined edges, no glare or flare, only a soft, sickly illumination that didn't seem to brighten the space around it. It was light without source or spread, as if each glow existed in isolation from the darkness it floated in. The compass needle began to twitch in time with the light's pulses. I glanced at the chronometer and frowned. It had been 3:14 when I last checked. Now it was 3:14 again. I tapped the display. It flickered, briefly showing 5:42 before snapping back to 3:14. "Survivor," I said into the comms. "Time's not moving right." His breathing rasped over the line. "It doesn't move wrong either. You're not in time anymore." "That doesn't make sense." "You're thinking of sense as a constant," he said. "Out there, you can trust it. In here, it's only a suggestion." The lights ahead shifted suddenly, and I had the nauseating impression that they weren't floating. They were watching. A faint vibration hummed in my teeth. It took me a moment to realize it was sound, low, layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once from deep underwater. I couldn't make out words, but the rhythm was deliberate. I killed the audio feed from external sensors. The sound didn't stop. It was inside. The survivor's voice cut through in a hoarse whisper. That's how it starts. "What is it saying?" I asked. "It's not saying anything," he replied. "It's remembering you." The lights drifted apart, revealing something far worse behind them. The sphere wasn't an absence of matter. It was an opening. Beyond the curtain of lights was not space. I don't have a better word for it. It wasn't blackness, but neither was it any color I'd ever seen. It was depth without distance, scale without measurement. My brain kept trying to apply perspective and failing. The compass needle jerked sharply to the right, the first movement it had made since I'd started toward the sphere. I turned the ship slightly to follow. The deeper I went, the more the ship seemed to dissolve around me. The console lights dimmed, not from power loss, but from fading. My gloved hands against the armrest felt thinner somehow, as though they were outlines being sketched over by something else. The survivor's voice was faint now, breaking apart like ice and water. "Don't look too long, don't listen." His words slipped into the hum, swallowed by the layer vibration, until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then, without warning, the hum stopped, and in that instant of silence, I heard my own voice, not through the speakers, not from my mouth, from outside, repeating the coordinates of my position. The lights ahead surged, rearranging into a pattern I almost recognized. It was a star map of my patrol sector. Every system, every station, every route, perfectly recreated, except for one addition, a single glowing point, where my ship was. The compass needle quivered, and then locked onto that point. I don't remember making the decision. I just remember the ship angling forward, the engines purring, the lights and impossible geometry rushing to meet me. And deep in my skull, beneath thought, beneath fear, something else was glad. The moment I crossed, the concept of forward stopped existing. I still moved. At least, I think I did. But there was no sensation of distance. The lights weren't approaching. They were replacing everything else. The black, the stars, the geometry, all dissolving into a swarm of drifting, pulsing orbs. The compass was warm in my hand now. Not from heat, more like the warmth of skin. And when I looked at it, I understood something that made my stomach turn. The needle wasn't pointing outward. It was pointing in. The calm crackled, not with the survivor's voice. With mine. You shouldn't have come. The tone was wrong, hollow, echoing, as though it came from inside a vast, empty chamber. My mouth was dry. Who are you? Static hiss, then my voice again. What's left? A shape emerged between the drifting lights. At first, I thought it was another ship, long, broken, hanging in the void. But as it rotated, I realized I was seeing a person, or what had once been a person. They floated upright, hands limp at their sides, their suit eaten away in places that should have vented them to the vacuum. Yet they didn't move, didn't drift. They simply hung there, suspended as though the space around them had turned solid. Their helmet was gone. Their face, pale, featureless, like clay before it's given form, turned toward me. And then it changed. It became my face. The vibration returned, deep and layered. But now it carried shape. Not words exactly. More like the memory of words, spoken before sound itself existed. I didn't understand them, but they understood me. The thing wearing my face raised a hand, and the lights shifted. They began to draw lines between themselves, sketching shapes in the air. I watched as they formed the outline of my ship, then the station, then the entire patrol sector. One by one, the lights went out, until only a single glowing point remained. My location. The compass needle shuddered violently, then snapped, the tip vanishing into thin air as though it had been yanked from a material world. The warmth spread up my arm, into my chest, into my head. I gasped, and the gasp wasn't mine. It came from a thing in front of me. The survivor's voice returned at last, faint and broken. Don't let it map you. Too late. The remaining light surged forward, flooding my vision until there was nothing else. When it faded, I was standing. No suit, no ship, no stars. Just a vast, endless plain of brass, engraved with symbols I almost recognized, not writing but instructions. Every line shimmered faintly, and when I leaned close, I saw they weren't etched into the surface at all. They were moving, writhing beneath it, as if the brass was only a thin skin stretched over something alive. The compass lay at my feet. The needle was gone. In its place was an open hole. Something inside the hole looked back at me, and I understood the compass had never been a guide. It was a key, and I had just unlocked something that had been waiting far longer than I had been alive. The vibration rose again, and this time I recognized my own voice among the many, not calling for help, welcoming the next one in. The derelict station hung in eternal silence, a graveyard carved from steel and sorrow, drifting on the edge of forgotten space. Inside the dim control room, the lone survivor sat slumped against a console, eyes hollow and wild, fingers trembling as they fiddled with the broken comm panel. Static whispered to the speakers, a thin, desperate hiss at first, then a voice crackling faintly into existence. You shouldn't have come. The survivor's breath hitched. The voice was his, yet not. It echoed from beyond the void, layered with countless others, a chorus of lost souls trapped between stars and silence. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It's happening again." Behind him, the compass rested on a cracked table, its needle gone, leaving only a hollow, endless black. The compass had found its new bearer, and the void waited patiently to claim them.